This is the User Adoption Podcast with your host, Henrik de Gyor.
Who are you and what do you do?
Yes, hi, Henrik. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to participate in your podcast. I'm Ron Schmelzer, and I am right now the managing partner and the principal analyst at a company called Cognilytica, which is an analyst firm focused on artificial intelligence and machine learning. And interestingly enough, we focus on adoption of AI and machine learning among large enterprises. So we really focus on what are the things that enterprises need to do to actually put artificial intelligence and machine learning into practice. Prior to that, I've had the great opportunity to meet you personally, Henrik, and work with you personally as part of our Tech Breakfast series. And Tech Breakfast was a series of morning demo format events that we ran all across the country. We were in 11 cities across the U.S., from Boston to Silicon Valley and points in between. And we had many companies, almost 3,000 companies demoed their technology to 7 minutes each in a format that was PowerPoint free to show people what their technology was all about. And that was also interesting. A lot of the questions were focused on how do you get people to care and use the technology that you're spending all this time on. So I've had a lot of experience there. I've had, prior to Tech Breakfast, I started and founded a startup company that ended up raising over $60 million. And we acquired two companies, and that company was acquired. And then after that, founded another analyst firm that grew to over $12 million and was acquired by a firm in Northern Virginia. So I've had some experience, not only building my own companies, but also seeing other people build their companies as well.
Ron, how are you involved with user adoption?
Well, in quite a few ways. So obviously in the current firm, in Cognilytica, what we do is we produce research on best practices for the industry and what's happening in adoption of artificial intelligence and machine learning. And our clients are a wide range of enterprises, so folks in finance, healthcare, insurance, manufacturing, banking, pharma, automotive, and we're looking at it like, well, some technologies are just really tricky to adopt, especially these advanced ones like artificial intelligence. People are wondering, well, what is AI all about? How does that relate to machine learning? How does that relate to all the cognitive technologies? And so what we do as a firm is we produce research on what their peers are doing, best practices, pitfalls, things to avoid, what vendors they should be working with, and just in general, more understanding of the best practices and processes for putting things like AI and machine learning and things like that into practice. So currently, actually, we're very much focused on adoption. But that's on the enterprise side. One of the things we also saw when I was during the Tech Breakfast years is spend a lot of time taking a look at how do you get people to even care about your product. A lot of the people who presented, a lot of them were startups. And the trickiest thing for startups is really understanding how do you get people to have interest and care in the product or service that you have. And cracking that nut, really trying to go from nobody caring to a lot of people caring is really the crux of what makes you successful or not successful. So, I brought my previous years of experience of being an analyst sort of for a while, for that 10, 11 years at ZapThink, brought that to the startup world, and now I'm bringing it back to the enterprise world. So really focusing on our clients now to try to help them understand how you bring emerging technologies into practice. And I think we've had now over 2 decades of experience in making that work.
What are the biggest challenges and successes with user adoption?
Well, the biggest challenge to user adoption is really understanding what the problem is and trying to make sure that the technology that you're putting into place is really solving their problem. In the case of individual users and small businesses, a lot of times the person whose problem you're trying to solve is the same person who's going to be using that technology, right, or software or product or whatever. But in large enterprises, it's a little more complicated because you're solving an enterprise problem. The person who may be using your technology, the actual user, if you want to think of user adoption, may not be the person who's responsible for buying it. That user may be part of a large team. There may be different kinds of problems. The person who's implementing your solution may be a technology person, but the problem you're solving is a business person's problem. So if you're really thinking about adoption from a user adoption perspective, you need to really understand what are the set of problems you're trying to solve. Who are the various people that you need to influence to be able to solve that problem? And what is the process that you're going to have to go through to really put the technology or the solution in place so that you can maximize user adoption, and think really carefully about who that customer is.
Ron, what advice would you like to share with people working on improving user adoption?
The biggest piece of advice is to really focus on the things that matter. One of the things that, if you're familiar with sort of that startup universe, you may have heard something called the lean startup methodology, which itself borrows from something called a customer-centric approach, which was developed by the folks over at Stanford. And the whole idea of lean startup is that you focus on something called the minimum viable product. The minimum viable product is the smallest thing that you can build, the very smallest increment of functionality or something that proves that the person actually has interest in what you're building, and then you sort of go from there. And so you can apply this minimum viable product to the thing that you're putting in place. Don't think about like building all this stuff and putting all this stuff together and hoping they care about one of the hundreds of things that you're putting in place. Really, you should be focusing on what is like the smallest thing you could put into place that proves that they'll actually use and care what you have. And that's my piece of advice. Really focus on the core of the value proposition and not, building like huge complicated things. So hope that helps.
Ron, where can we learn more about user adoption and your work on the subject?
Interested in learning more about what we've been doing, what we're doing on the subject now, especially on AI and ML, I encourage you to take a look at the Cognilytica site. So it's Cognilytica, as in cognitive analytica. So just Cognilytica. And, interested in taking a look at, connect with me on LinkedIn. Look for me. My name is Ron Schmelzer. I'm happy to connect with you, Schmelzer. Also on Twitter, check me out at rschmelzer or at Cognilytica. Definitely want to hear from you. Want your feedback and your thoughts. Happy to connect with you.
For more on this, visit useradoptionpodcast.com. Don't forget to please subscribe, rate, and review. And for a book about this, check out useradoptionbook.com. Tune in next week for the next episode. Thanks for listening.